Have you ever felt like you don't belong anywhere? That while everyone around you seems to fit perfectly into the gears of social life, you're always one step out of place, as if you were watching everything from the outside? What if I told you that this uncomfortable feeling, this anguish of being an eternal stranger, might be exactly what sets you free? What happens when we stop fighting against our own strangeness and start embracing it like someone embracing the wind that blows against the current? There's a kind of belonging that imprisons us more than it welcomes us. When you try too hard to fit in, to be accepted, to follow the script that everyone seems to know by heart, something inside you starts to die slowly. It's like wearing clothes that aren't your size and pretending you're comfortable just because everyone else is wearing the same thing. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger called this living in the mode of the impersonal, the famous Das Man, which in English we can translate as the mode of they or one. You know when you ask why you do something and the answer is because everyone does it or because that's how it's done? That's the territory of the impersonal, where you stop being yourself to become just another reflection of other people's expectations. Belonging, when it becomes an obsession, turns into a prison. You wake up, go to work, come back home, repeat conversations that mean nothing, laugh at jokes you don't find funny, pretend interest in topics that leave you empty inside. All of this to avoid feeling the weight of being different, of being the odd one out in the picture. The problem is that in this game of masks, you forget what your real face looks like. You look in the mirror and see a collage of other people's expectations stitched together where your essence should be. And then comes the question that won't shut up. Who am I when I'm not trying to be who others want me to be? I perfectly understand when you feel that discomfort at family gatherings, at meetups with friends, at parties where everyone seems to be having fun except you. It feels like there's a secret code that everyone learned and you missed class that day. But maybe the problem isn't that you missed class. Maybe you woke up in the middle of a theater play and realized that everyone is reciting memorized lines while you're still trying to understand the script. This moment of awakening is painful because it breaks the illusion that there's a safe place where you'll finally fit in. The shock of not belonging is like waking up in the middle of the night and realizing you were dreaming. For a second, you don't know where you are, who you are, what you're doing there. This disorientation is terrifying, but it's also liberating. Because for the first time you realize that you don't have to follow the script. You don't have to belong to the machine if the machine is crushing you. Heidegger would say that this is the moment when consciousness calls you back home, to your own authentic existence. It's as if an inner voice whispered, "You weren't born to be a copy. You were born to be an original." The impersonal is this ghost that lives inside society, dictating how things should be done. It's the they that appears in every sentence when you don't want to take responsibility for your own life. They don't do that. They think like this. They expect that. Who is this they? No one and everyone at the same time. It's common sense. Herd morality. The dictatorship of normality that tells us how to act, speak, feel, and even dream. The impersonal has no face, but it has power. It convinces you that your happiness depends on following the invisible rules it created. When you stop worrying about what they think, something magical happens. You realize that most of your anxieties weren't yours. They were borrowed. You were carrying on your back the expectations of people you don't even know well. The peace of the outsider begins exactly there, in this radical detachment from the judgment of others. You stop asking permission to exist the way you are. You stop translating your desires into the language of what is socially acceptable. And yes, this scares the people around you because they're still trapped in the dance of the impersonal. And seeing someone leave the choreography is like seeing someone break the rules of a game everyone agreed to play. There's a profound difference between fear and anxiety. Fear has an object. You're afraid of heights, of snakes, of losing your job, of being alone. But anxiety is different. Anxiety is that vague feeling that catches you by surprise when you're driving alone or lying in bed in the early morning hours. It's a restlessness without a name, a sensation of emptiness in the face of nothingness. Heidegger says that anxiety is what we feel when we realize there's no solid ground beneath our feet, that life doesn't have an instruction manual, and that we're radically free to choose who we want to be. Feeling like a stranger in the world isn't a defect, it's a compass. It's the sign that you're conscious of your own freedom. Because if you were completely immersed in the impersonal, you wouldn't feel this anxiety. You'd be anesthetized, following the flow without questioning. But you question. You look around and think, is this all? Is this the meaning of life? Work 40 years to buy things I don't need and impress people I don't care about? This anxiety is uncomfortable, but it's honest. It tells you the truth that no one wants to hear. You are free. And this freedom is scary because it comes accompanied by responsibility. Society has a very efficient way of making us fall into inauthenticity. It offers infinite distractions, comforting routines, well-defined social roles. You can be the successful professional, the exemplary family man, the fun friend, the rebel without a cause. They're ready-made characters, just pick one and perform. The problem is that while you're busy being these socially approved versions of yourself, you forget to ask what you really want, what you really feel, who you really are when the curtains close. The outsider is the one who refuses to fall into this trap. He maintains a safe distance from the everyday, not because he's superior or arrogant, but because he understood that diving headfirst into the rush of common life is a way of running from himself. He observes from afar, like someone watching a movie knowing it's fiction. This doesn't mean he doesn't participate in life, but that he participates consciously, without losing sight that the rules of the game are arbitrary and can be questioned. He's in the world, but he's not of the world, and in this distance, he finds clarity. And speaking of clarity, if you're enjoying this content and want to deepen this journey even further, you might also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. In the middle of all the empty conversation that fills our days, there's a deep silence waiting to be heard. The outsider knows this silence. He doesn't need to talk all the time to prove he exists. He doesn't need to fill every second of quiet with noise because he's comfortable with the void. Heidegger talks about idle talk, this incessant and superficial conversation we have just to avoid feeling the weight of our own existence. It's those conversations about the weather, about sports, about celebrities, about anything that doesn't require really thinking. The outsider's silence is a revolutionary act. In a society that values whoever talks the loudest, whoever appears the most, whoever sells themselves the best, choosing silence is choosing authenticity. It's saying, I don't need your validation. I don't need to prove anything. I'm okay with myself, even when I'm alone, even when I'm silent. And this peace, which comes from within, is much more solid than any external applause. Now let's talk about something most people try to avoid their entire lives: death. Heidegger has a concept called being toward death, which basically means we are beings conscious of our own finitude. We know we're going to die. And this knowledge, however uncomfortable it may be, should change everything. Because if time is limited, if each passing day is one day less, why the hell are we spending our energy trying to please a world that is fundamentally indifferent to us? The outsider understands this in a visceral way. He knows that life is too short to be lived in other people's expectations. When you accept your mortality, when you look death in the eyes and say, I know you're coming, something changes inside you. Things that once seemed urgent lose their importance. Other people's opinions become lighter. You stop postponing your own life waiting for the perfect moment that will never come. The consciousness of death gives you urgency, yes, but an urgency directed toward what really matters, not toward what society says should matter. There's a strange freedom in being a foreigner everywhere. The outsider doesn't depend on geographical roots to feel at home. He carries his home inside himself. He can be in any city, in any country, in any social group, and still maintain that inner peace of someone who doesn't need external validation to know who he is. This isn't coldness or indifference. It's autonomy. It's the ability to say, I don't need you to accept me for me to accept myself. I don't need to belong to a place to belong to myself. This peace doesn't come easy. It requires that you give up the fantasy that there's a magical place where you'll finally fit perfectly. There isn't. Not in the perfect family, not in the ideal group of friends, not in the dream job. Because the discomfort isn't out there, it's in here. And the only way to resolve this is to make peace with your own strangeness, with the fact that you are unique, and that necessarily means you're going to be different from everyone. And that's okay. More than okay, it's liberating. When you don't belong, you gain a superpower, the power to question. While everyone follows traditions without thinking, repeating behaviors because that's how it's always been, you see the cracks in the system. You realize that the emperor has no clothes, that the rules that govern our lives are arbitrary, created by people who are already dead. The outsider sees that normal life is a social construction, and constructions can be deconstructed. I know it's hard to hear this, but most of the expectations that bind you aren't yours. They're inherited expectations you never questioned. The outsider looks at the idea of getting married, having kids, buying a house, climbing the career ladder, and asks, why? What if my path is completely different? Who said everyone has to follow the same script? These questions set you free because they reveal that you can draw your own trajectory without the ties of a prefabricated social destiny. Heidegger talks about the concept of care, or Sorge in German. But it's not that care of taking care of the house or taking care of someone. It's care as the fundamental structure of our being. It's about what you direct your attention to, your energy, your concern. Most people spend their lives caring about the image they project to the world, caring about appearing successful, appearing happy, appearing normal. But the outsider cares about something else. He cares about his own essence, his own truth, his own authenticity. He asks, what do I really want? What really matters to me? And then he directs his care toward that, not toward the mask others want him to wear. There's immense power in caring for yourself in this radical way. Because when you stop spending energy maintaining a false image, all that energy becomes available for you to really live. You stop worrying if your clothes are in fashion, if your house is impressive, if your car is from this year. Not because you don't care about anything, but because you understood that these things are peripheral. They don't define who you are. What defines you is how you treat people when no one is watching. It's what you do with your Saturday mornings when you don't have to impress anyone. It's who you are in the silence of your own mind. Boredom has a bad reputation. We do everything to avoid it. We grab our phone, turn on the TV, call someone, anything to avoid being alone with our own thoughts. But Heidegger would say that profound boredom is actually a portal. It's in that emptiness, in that absence of external stimulus, that the most important questions can finally emerge. Who am I? What am I doing with my life? Does this really make me happy, or am I just following the script? The outsider knows boredom well. He spends a lot of time alone, and at first this can seem like a curse. But with time, he discovers that isolation isn't pathological loneliness, it's philosophical solitude. It's the necessary space for you to find yourself. Because when you're always surrounded by people, always connected, always busy, you don't have time to process your own experience. You live on autopilot, reacting to the world instead of consciously responding to it. Boredom forces you to slow down, to look inward, to confront the questions you were avoiding. It's completely valid to feel fear when you decide to embrace your strangeness. Because living authentically isn't easy. It's much simpler to follow the herd, do what everyone does, think what everyone thinks. But authenticity requires courage. It requires that you endure the judgmental gaze of people who don't understand why you don't want what they want. It requires that you maintain your truth even when everyone around you is telling you you're wrong. It's a continuous act of resistance against the pressure to conform. I'm not saying this to make you anxious, but to wake you up. Being authentic is a choice you have to make every day. It's not a one-time decision you make and done, it's resolved. It's a constant commitment to stay true to your own strangeness despite the price it demands. And yes, there's a price. You might lose friends who only liked the fake version of you. You might disappoint family members who had expectations you won't fulfill. You might feel alone at parties full of people. But in return, you gain something most people will never have. The peace of being genuine, of sleeping knowing you're not betraying who you are. For the outsider, the world isn't a predetermined destiny. It's not a path you have to follow from point A to point Z because that's what your parents did and their parents did before them. The world is an open field of possibilities. Each day is a blank page where you can write whatever you want. You're not obligated to choose a stable career if it suffocates you. You're not obligated to get married and have kids if that doesn't resonate with you. You're not obligated to live in the same city where you were born just because it's tradition. You can draw your own trajectory, even if it's crooked, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone but you. This is scary because freedom is always scary. When there's no script, you have to improvise. When there's no map, you have to trust your own sense of direction. But that's the beauty of it. You're not trapped in a prefabricated social destiny. You are the author of your own story, and authorial stories are always more interesting than copies. The outsider understands that the world is full of open doors, and that most people spend their entire lives locked in a room because they're afraid to explore the hallway. There's a truth everyone knows but few accept. Deep down, we are fundamentally alone. You can be surrounded by people, but each of us is trapped in our own head, looking at the world through our own eyes. No one will feel exactly what you feel, and that's okay. It's the human condition. The outsider stops running from this truth. He looks loneliness in the face and says, "Okay, so this is it. I'm alone in this journey." And instead of being tragic, this becomes liberating. Because if you don't need to be completed by other people, if you're not looking for your other half because you're already whole, then your relationships stop being necessity and become choice. You stay with people because you genuinely appreciate their company, not because you're afraid of being alone. The peace of not belonging is the peace of someone who finally stopped looking for external validation. It's the peace of someone who understood that the only true home that exists is the home you build inside yourself. It's the peace of someone who's not afraid of silence, of solitude, of their own company. It's the peace of someone who knows their strangeness isn't a defect that needs to be corrected, but a unique characteristic that makes them who they are. And yes, the world will continue to look at you with suspicion. People will continue to ask you why you're different, why you don't follow the same path as them. But you'll smile knowing you have a secret they haven't discovered yet, that freedom is on the other side of belonging. The image of the outsider is the image of someone who learned to dance in the abyss. He knows there's no solid ground, that everything is uncertain, that life is fragile and temporary. But instead of being paralyzed by this knowledge, he uses it as fuel to live with more intensity, with more truth, with more courage. He walks alone not because he's antisocial, but because he understood that the only path worth following is the path you choose for yourself, not the path they told you should follow. So if you feel like an eternal stranger, if you look around and don't recognize yourself in any of the roles society offers, know that there's nothing wrong with you. You're awake while most are sleeping. You're questioning while most are accepting. And yes, this consciousness hurts. Authenticity hurts. But the alternative is worse. Living an entire life as an imposter just to please people who probably won't even remember you in 10 years. The strange peace of the outsider is the peace of someone who gave up trying to fit in and decided to simply exist. It's the peace of someone who chose authenticity instead of approval, truth instead of comfort, freedom instead of security. It's a conquered peace, not inherited, a peace that requires constant work against the temptation to return to the herd. But it's a real peace, solid, unbreakable, because it comes from within. I perfectly understand when you look at the world and feel like you're not from here. But maybe the problem isn't that you're out of place. Maybe you're exactly where you need to be, outside the box, outside the matrix, outside the comfortable prison others call normality. And from this place, you have a privileged view. You see what others don't see. You're free in a way others don't even know is possible. So embrace your strangeness. Not belonging is the greatest form of freedom that exists. You don't owe anyone anything. You don't need to justify your existence. You don't need to fit into a mold that was made to produce copies. You are the original, and originals don't fit into molds. They break the molds. They show that it's possible to exist in other ways, follow other paths, live other lives. Living as an outsider isn't a curse, it's a calling. It's Heidegger's call for you to take back the reins of your own existence, for you to stop living in the mode of they and start living in the mode of I. It's the call for you to look death in the eyes and decide that you're not going to waste the limited time you have trying to please a world that will never be satisfied. It's the call for you to find peace not in the approval of others, but in your own self-approval. And when you finally answer this call, when you finally accept your condition as an eternal stranger, something magical happens. You stop looking for a place to call home because you realize you've always been the home. You stop looking for your tribe because you realize your tribe is yourself. You stop looking for peace out there because you realize the peace was always in here, waiting for you to stop running from it. The outsider's journey is solitary, but it's not empty. In fact, it's full of meaning because each step is conscious, each choice is genuine. While the people around live on autopilot, repeating patterns they learned from other people who are also on autopilot, you're navigating through life with your eyes wide open. You see the traps, You notice when society is trying to sell you a version of happiness that's not compatible with who you are. You recognize when a relationship is asking you to diminish yourself to fit into it. You feel when an environment is sucking your vital energy to transform you into just another corporate zombie. What's interesting is that the more you embrace your condition as an outsider, the more you realize there are others like you. Not many, but they exist. They're the ones who also have that gleam in their eyes of someone who's awake, that somewhat displaced way of someone who doesn't buy all the stories they sell out there. And when two outsiders meet, it doesn't take much to recognize each other. It's as if there's a secret language among those who chose to live outside the norm. You don't need to talk about the weather or pretend interest in banalities. You can go straight to what matters, who you really are, what you really think, how you really see the world. But even in these rare encounters, the outsider maintains his independence, because he learned that trying to belong to any group can become another prison. The outsider identity isn't meant to be a new little box. It's a non-identity, a refusal to define yourself by the terms of any system. There's also a practical side to this philosophy. When you're no longer trapped by social expectations, you save an absurd amount of energy. Think about how much time you've already spent worrying about what others will think. How much money you've already wasted buying things to impress people you don't even like. The outsider doesn't waste energy on performances. He invests in substance, in things that really add value to his existence. And look, I'm not going to romanticize this life too much. There are difficult days. There are days when you'll look to the side and see everyone celebrating achievements that mean nothing to you, and you'll wonder if you're wrong. There are days when loneliness will weigh heavy, but then you remember that ignorance was never real happiness. It was just anesthesia, and you prefer to feel everything, even the pain of being different, than to go back to feeling nothing. The outsider also develops a different relationship with failure, because when you're not playing the game by society's terms, you can't lose according to its rules. If you're not competing for the same definition of success as everyone else, then the traditional markers of failure don't apply to you. Lost your job? Maybe it's the chance to do something that really matters. Relationship ended? Maybe it was meant to end because you were following a script instead of building something authentic. This freedom to redefine what it means to win and lose in life is one of the greatest gifts of not belonging. You're no longer hostage to external metrics of value. You create your own metrics. Maybe for you, success is waking up every day doing something you consider meaningful. Maybe it's having free time to think, read, create. Maybe it's being able to look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back at you. The world won't understand you. Your family may never understand why you make the choices you make. Your childhood friends might drift away because you no longer have anything in common. And that's okay, because you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to live your own life, not an edited version of it. And you know what's most liberating about this journey? It's realizing that you don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to make everyone understand why you are the way you are. You don't owe an explanation of your life to anyone but yourself. This saves an enormous amount of energy that most people spend trying to justify their choices, defending their way of being, arguing why they deserve to exist the way they exist. The outsider simply exists. Period. Without justification. Without defense. Without argument. He is what he is, and whoever doesn't like it will have to deal with their own discomfort, because he's not going to change to accommodate other people's unease. There's a moment in the outsider's journey when you realize that the opinion that matters most is your own. Not in a narcissistic way, but in a profoundly healthy way. If you don't respect yourself, no one will respect you. If you don't value yourself, no external validation will fill that hole. The outsider decides to stop begging. He decides that his own approval is sufficient. The outsider's anxiety never completely disappears. It stays there, like a constant background hum, reminding you that there are no definitive answers, that life is fundamentally absurd, that you're doing all of this without an instruction manual. But with time, you learn to live with this anxiety. It stops being your enemy and becomes your traveling companion. It keeps you alert, prevents you from falling asleep in the comfort of easy answers. It's the voice that whispers, don't settle, don't conform, keep questioning, keep growing, keep being true.